Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where in the world you actually reside. My name is Phaedra Martin, and I am pleased to help present to you modernizing your water and wastewater HMI SCADA, leveraging your existing Prophecy software. Today, we are excited to have a wonderful speaker, but I'm going to give everyone about one more minute, as I know folks may be coming from other calls or other activities. So I will give it one more minute before I truly go into introductions. So give us one more minute. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. We'll start in about another 10 seconds or so. We want to make sure we have ample time for people to join. Thank you. Okay, I think we're ready to get going. So again, my name is Phaedra Martin. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you reside. We want to thank you again for joining us on our journey as we bring to you a very relevant topic of modernizing your water and wastewater HMI SCADA, leveraging existing Prophecy software that you already have. Today's speaker is Gimmi Filice, who is a senior product manager for our HMI SCADA software within GE Vernova's Prophecy software and services. You are dealing with a very experienced speaker today. He comes to us with 25 years of automation experience. He is well-known expert in HMI SCADA and data management. He has developed and managed software that is the foundation for plant automations at thousands of sites, ranging from water, wastewater, power, automotive, stadiums, airports, and many more. Gimmi knows the answer to most any automation software and data management question, and he is dedicated to customers' long-term success. So we truly have a great experience that is going to be coming to us today. But before we fully dive in, let's go over a little bit of housekeeping. There's various buttons on your screen that you see right now. Ranging from, you can enter questions as we go. Please submit any and all questions as we go, and we'll take those questions at the end. You can also contact our team. There's also a button that has additional resources, which you can see on your screen. So various other thought leadership pieces of content, such as white papers and other webinars. You can also share share the webinar via LinkedIn and email. You can connect with Gimmi as well, your product manager. And if there's any technical assistance there, that's available as well. The one big one that I want everyone to remember is please fill out the feedback survey. We want to make sure that we're continuing to bring you relevant content that you're needing and that you're wanting to help amplify your processes. Okay, so please take the feedback survey. That's button number 7. And of course, you can always share. If you're having any issues with the web tool, please refresh your browser. That seems to always help. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the real expert here, Gimmi Filice, who's going to take it away. Take it away, Gimmi.
Thanks, Phaedra, for the great words. And welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining the webinar today. So as the title indicates, I'm going to be touching through various topics in terms of modernization and just some of the considerations to kind of get you going down that journey. And one place to start is just with some of the challenges I know several of our customers are facing. One of the big ones is, and this, we've been supplying and adapting and updating our software for many years, and often what ends up happening is we'll get initial implementations that may have happened 20, 25 years ago, and while the software may have been updated, meaning the actual HMI SCADA software, the application was not. And that's something that I know a lot of our customers are facing, and as they start looking at modernization, there's several topics to consider if you're in that situation. We've also been hit with, continually hit with more regulatory and security requirements, both just from a general, general cybersecurity perspective, but also with, guidelines and in some cases mandated requirements around security as well. We'll also hit every once in a while with forced updates, and one is coming up next year with Windows 10 going out of support. And we know we have a lot of people in both this industry and other industries that are going to be faced with pretty much being forced to do something to make sure they can stay secure with their operating system as well. So, those are definitely some considerations. Another one I'll be touching on is around visualization and just some of the changes you can look for there, and then how to optimize as well. So it's one thing, you've got your system in place. How do I optimize my process? How do I optimize just how I even maintain and manage software, really to be more effective? And then, of course, a lot of these ultimately, aren't just for the sake of doing it. It really does come with cost reductions or efficiency updates as well. So some of the key areas I'm going to be touching on today, and and I'll just sort of say right now, I've got a lot of content. I'm going to be touching on these various areas, and we're also going to be looking at doing deeper dives into some of these topics as well to really help you out through the year as well. So one of the key areas is around cybersecurity. So modernizing your system is also about just continually making it more secure, based on some of the changes that are going on around the industry and the world, for that matter. I'll touch on human factors, which is really around user experience and how do you make the system more effective for your operators or whatever other roles that you've got. How to help with process and maintenance optimization. So I'll be touching on some analytics and things like that, as well as just some architectural considerations. And then for some of our customers, sustainability is one of the metrics they need to meet. So I'll touch on how we can help you a bit there as well. So starting off on the security side of things, I probably don't need to tell this audience about this, but ultimately water is considered one of the most critical infrastructures in any country. Things like water and power are always key, really to help keep the economy going, and obviously, when you're in your home, you obviously want clean water available at all times. So one of the things here is there are agencies globally, so as an example, in North America, there are NIST guidelines, in terms of how to really help secure your control system, and provides guidelines on that. There's also other industries globally, that as an example, I've got on the screen for Europe and Australia. And then, different countries, different regions will have different guidelines, but for the most part, they're all focused on making sure that, you're maintaining systems, you're keeping them updated with all the security vulnerabilities, you've got processes in place, and we'll touch a little bit on what that means as well. But while the names and acronyms may be different, a lot of the requirements are consistent regardless of where you may be located. So really, when we look at security, there are one of the areas that, or considerations, is to really look at the CIA model. And really the challenge with this model, and CIA obviously meaning, as per the screen, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, of that data, for example. One of the things that we find in our industry is the priorities are a little bit different depending on, obviously the industry, but, just in general, whether you're looking at IT or OT. And often these two things fight each other in the sense of priorities, So as an example, from a general IT perspective, the biggest consideration is confidentiality, protecting the data, making sure only those that should see it can see it, Whereas when you start getting into an OT system, really the top your top priority is about being able to control your process, whether, obviously in this industry, things like the water treatment process, but, just in any industry in general, the OT system is really about getting access to all the data you can to make the best decisions you can to maintain your system, keep it up and running. So these two do fight against each other a little bit, and often, what you'll find yourself doing is really balancing it a little bit, based on the fact that they do kind of contradict each other a little bit, and that's why you'll see the CIA and the AIC kind of flipped around a little bit, depending on that. So again, definitely a consideration, as you kind of go down the journey if you haven't done so already. In terms of even just some of the things that you can do or put in place to really help yourself become more security aware and really help with secure your system. Obviously, one of the things is to look at any of the industry alerts that are out. There are mechanisms, again, depending on the region that you're in, where you can get access to the various vulnerabilities that have been found within the control systems software, as an example. And that's really where the CISA comes into play. And they are continually putting out notices. Also on this one, we provide that notice as well for our own software. So you can go to our security site and subscribe to that data, or go to our support site and look up if there are any vulnerabilities in the software. Typically, the response, either it's something we'll address in a patch or in a new version. So we'll have a little bit more on that later, but often it really is about watching and just making sure you are staying up to date if one of those vulnerabilities could impact you. And again, this isn't just for our software, but operating systems, typically these are covered, but, operating systems or any other software you may have throughout your system. There are various tools out in the industry, like the AWA in North America does have a good set of guidelines and tools that really can help you assess as well. Organizing your company around it is obviously another way of really making sure that this stays top of mind, by designating representatives within your teams that really can take ownership of making sure some of these concepts are maintained and exercised throughout your organization. Putting plans together, so part of planning isn't just, obviously a lot of what we're trying to do is preventative, but in the event of something actually happening, and we have had customers in a variety of industries that have been hit with, various ransomware or whatever other, other security issues, and one of the big things here is a response plan. So in the event of, hey, we have been compromised, how do you shut down access while maintaining your control systems? Those things do require a plan that's often specific to, how you're organized and how your systems are architected. And, again, things like simulating an attack, just to make sure things are going well. And other things some customers have done is things like consolidating SCADA systems, just to help reduce the attack vector. Obviously, the more systems you've got, the more exposure you have. Reducing them also helps. Means you're only shutting down one or two places. For example, if you get down to one or two servers instead of 100, obviously there's a big impact in terms of just being able to manage it. So again, these are just some of the ways that you can bolster your defense topic. And the other thing is, looking at, and this is sort of a methodology that's used in the industry, is really looking at a zero trust type model, meaning, and really what this means is, assume by default, assume that if a client is connecting to your system, it's not a client unless you've allowed it already. So, that's a simple example of it. But, again, zero trust is probably the way to go if you want to really secure your system. And this means things like keeping up to date with the latest versions, like we've already talked about. What GE Digital or GE Vernova can provide is things like additional tools that we've released in recent years that really come with our latest versions of software. One of them is our prophecy authentication. So rather than authenticating, just using the built-in solution, which is great for most applications, but kind of taking an extra step and adding things like multifactor, for example. And I think we all deal with that today with, whether it's our banking or, other systems nowadays. It's really about, what kind of additional information you can get to really truly identify that the person logging in is who they say they are. Reviewing things like user permissions on a regular basis. Should this person have access to the system? What data should they have access? Should they have access to everything or just parts of the application? So again, these are things that you'll want to review regularly. We've also got capabilities for things like, enabling clients. So as per my example at the beginning of this, making sure that the person is who they say they are, but it's also, the client that's connecting. Is it actually one of my clients, one of my SCADA clients? Is it on the list? So, by actually leveraging a client allowed list, it's just basically saying, hey, I know and trust this particular client that's trying to access the server, and any other connections can be rejected. Things like session timeouts, you can enable those on a variety of clients, whether it's through the operating system or through the tools within our SCADA software, being able to say, hey, if no one's doing anything after 5 minutes, log them out, or at least block the access to the system so that somebody just can't walk up and do something. So because a lot of the cybersecurity is not necessarily done through, digital means. Sometimes there's human factors involved as well. You can also do things like making sure that all our downloads and patches are signed, making sure those signatures are there, so that you're not, if somebody's sending you software, is it legitimately our software that they're sending you, as an example. And then there are things you can do from an OT perspective as well. So things like certificate-based protocols are becoming more and more popular. It's not always possible to do this. A lot of us are dealing with legacy equipment with older protocols that may not have it, but definitely, where possible, you can definitely leverage it, especially as you start re-looking at your architecture. And, other ways we can help, we are ISO 27001 certified. Really what that means is, hey, we've got plans, we've got processes within our business to make sure we do things like vulnerability tests, penetration tests. We've got people that are trained on it, and we follow those processes. And we also, the other really important thing about that is we've got vulnerability response, meaning if we do get notified of a vulnerability, we do have plans in place in terms of how we address those. So really, that's what some of these standards are about. So we do have registration on that. And the other really key thing that you can leverage here is we do provide secure deployment guides for our software. Whether you're using iFIX, CIMPLICITY, if you've got Historian with it, Operations Hub, and I mentioned just a few here, but really most of our portfolio does have this information available. So as you move forward with your implementations or you relook at architecture, these documents do provide a lot of information on how to architect, but also some configuration advice in terms of, how to enable security, and, some of the things I talked about on the previous slide are covered within these guides. So if you do have an initiative on that, just either reach out to one of our partners and ask for it, or you can go to our software documentation site, and they are available there as well. So one of the other kind of really key things, as you start looking at modernization of your system, one of the other key things is really how operators work with the software itself and the application that you've built. So this has evolved over the years. There's several standards out there in the industry, like ISA 101. There's things like the High Performance HMI Handbook, and a variety of other guidelines and assistance that is available in the market to really help you make sure that you're taking a good approach. I'm going to go through some of those guidelines here today as well. But really, one of the key things, about this entire thing, there's several numbers on the screen in terms of, how operators interact with it. If you don't have a very clean and clear user interface, for example, it can lead to errors from the operators, or, probably the biggest advantage, and when I go through some of the examples, but one of the biggest areas is really around just incident response time. So while these all are key factors, one of the big things is, how can you make sure you identify a problem as quickly as possible, something that needs addressing? How do you get that figured out quickly? So that is really one of the key reasons for going down this journey, is faster response, reducing errors. Ultimately that means your plant stays up and running longer, as an example. So with that, some of the things, a lot of this, we've got, as Phaedra mentioned, I've been in this industry quite a while, and, go back to some of the early displays of, that were done in the early days, and this industry has evolved, definitely a lot in the last, decade or so. But, originally we started from push buttons and real physical gauges, and then slowly as computers came into play, it definitely made it a lot easier to put together actual graphics displays that operators could use instead of the traditional meters and gauges and buttons. With that though, especially as we evolved through the 90s, when things were fairly simple, as the software evolved and became more powerful, what ended up happening is, especially when Windows came in and and the performance was increased, and a lot of the what we could do graphically became more available. We started building out more complex and rich displays with way more information, so we could make sure that we really get it to those operators. It was actually kind of almost a step backwards in some ways. The initial HMIs were simple because of the computing restrictions. As computing became more powerful, we started putting in fancy graphical displays, 3D rendering of equipment, and all sorts of interesting displays started to evolve out of this. And really in the last 10 years, that was almost more of a hindrance in many ways. And then over the last several years, things became more focused. And, and we also started getting things like mobile devices, whether it was tablets, smartphones, so a lot of, and obviously the web technology started to really become a factor over the last decade. So really what this led to is, just way more users, different roles that really needed attention. And, ultimately it started becoming a challenge then of, am I getting the right information? Is it easy for the operator to find the information he needs? And that's really where a lot of this started to evolve. And when you start looking at, part of your modernization strategy, really looking at the user design or the user interface and the HMI displays that get put in front of operators. Really, the initial thought was, oh, we'll just redesign them. But really, it's not just about designing. It's really about working and understanding what those processes are as well. So it really is about, what is the process change? How do I make my operators more effective? How do I make sure that they're getting the information they need to do their job properly? And also, again, consider roles. So operators aren't the only people that are looking at the data coming from your SCADA system. You've now got other roles, whether it's, around quality, management wants their dashboards, all sorts of new roles have also come into play, where traditional HMIs may not be as effective as, some of the more modern tools. So really, when you do this, it's really about taking that step back a bit and really looking at the process, not just, hey, how do I, should I just change colors and, background colors and things like that. I won't get into super detail on this, but I will cover, just some of the key principles to consider as you do look at modernizing your user interface or your HMI application. One of them is minimalism. And really what this means is if the operator's not going to need that data or that piece of information, don't put it in front of them. Right, so additional information just for the sake of, because I can put it on the screen, or graphics that don't necessarily need to be there, just hinder detection. The more things that are on the screen, the busier the displays are, the less likely or the longer it might take that for an operator to detect an alarm, for example. Color does matter, so again, minimalizing graphics on the screen and minimizing the different colors on the screen really have an impact. Look at visual coding, meaning not necessarily 3D graphics, but just something that helps them go, oh, yeah, that's tank 3 or something like that. Those things become important. How you actually put the information on the display. The other thing with with the display is context, and these kind of go together. So as an example, first step is draw attention to the problem. Second might be to drill down to the next level of information. So when we talk of, typically, traditionally we've used things like PID diagrams and stuff like that as sort of the default way of displaying HMI screens. Really start to take that step back and look at it more from the perspective of, how do I make sure that the operator gets the information they need? It's other things are like embedded trends, like being able to have if the operator is going to need to see the trend chart anyway, maybe embed it on the display. Hopefully by minimalizing some of the other things, you'll have room to actually have a trend display. Screen hierarchy is important, as I mentioned. This kind of also helps from an organizational perspective and the context. Hey, I'm looking at pump station 3 or whatever it happens to be. I might have a map that shows all the pump stations, and then I can drill down to the specific ones as an example. And really that helps with navigation. And then of course, one of the really key things and why we actually use SCADA systems is making sure that the alarms are presented clearly. Because ultimately you want to detect those as quickly as possible so they can be addressed before they become bigger issues. So again, these are just some of the key principles to consider as part of that journey. And we do, by the way, we do have a lot more information you can get off of our website as well that you can, in terms of dipping into some of these topics into a bit more detail as well. The other thing to consider, as I mentioned previously, are things like roles. Obviously the operator is one of the most key roles in most HMIs, but there are other roles that come into play. Whether it's, again, your supervisor, manager, somebody who wants to understand, make sure that, just everything's running smoothly across the system may just want an overview. The operator obviously will have to often do control operations, things like that. So there's just, some simple differences. But again, think of what do they need, what information do they need to do their job as part of all this. And one of the big changes that has happened over the last decade or so, obviously, is some of the, as I mentioned previously, the addition of tablets, phones, web technology continues to obviously become more and more, leveraging thin clients. As you start thinking about those roles, think about the medium and the format as well. Or if they're going to be on their tablet most often, make sure the display is very, more tablet friendly than, a typical control room display. You may also have to consider environment. We've got, customers where, they're working in darker conditions, so you may need to look at, different contrast settings and being able to switch between the two quickly and easily, as an example. So, the screen you see there is a simple example of taking something that may have been a process display and then looking at it from just what are the key metrics I need to monitor, and I can quickly see the ones that are in orange or yellow, depending on your display, or the ones in red just pop out quickly as well. So those are some of the things to consider. Or this is an example of, hey, let's put more information on the screen, and really this is one before after example where you can kind of see it just cleans things up, makes it easier to see where what the key variables are. Overall, you're leveraging a map still, but just a lot cleaner and easier to really detect if there's issues, as an example. So this is these are just a couple examples. There's definitely a lot of interesting things that our customers have done, and our partners working with customers as well have really put together. One of the other areas, and I wanted to touch on, is again, looking at different roles, different information that may be required by our customers or by your operators, or your different roles that you might have within your organization. Looking at web technology to really help deliver that. And that's really what Operations Hub is about. Operations Hub is our web-based, native HTML5-based HMI solution, but it's really a lot more than that as well. As it kind of indicates here on the screen, it actually has the ability to get data, obviously from our SCADA systems, if you are doing more of an HMI application, but also from other OT and IT sources. Whether it's other historians, relational databases that may have other information that may be relevant, depending on who your end user is. The idea is you can put together more sophisticated displays that are getting data not only from our SCADA systems, but also from other systems, really to help provide mashups and things like that of information that may be relevant, not just from the control system, but from other systems that may be in play. Or it might just be for, somebody going back, a process engineer going back and looking at historically, how things have happened, leveraging historian and its ability to do things like various analysis tools, and really helping look at how can I optimize my system, or hey, we had a lot of alarms last month, how do I reduce them? All those things start to come into play, and really, Operations Hub is our user interface for that. And it does also have the unique ability of being able to see your existing displays as well. So if you don't necessarily have to go out and rip and replace everything, you can start augmenting it as well, leveraging this technology and bringing it in with leveraging some of the web tools and other data that might be required. So again, if you haven't looked at Operations Hub, definitely reach out to us or one of our partners, and they can definitely, help provide some more context with it. And here's another example of, I might have a map where I can actually click on a area of the map and then have all the display elements adapt based on what I've selected. And this, while I don't show it on this display, one of these, like the big window of the trend, could actually even be the HMI screen. So there's really a lot you can do with this tool, and really help, and the idea again is not necessarily that you're going to go and redraw all your graphics necessarily day one or anything like that, but you can start bringing in new technology and still leverage your existing system wherever possible. So again, something to consider with that. So again, where can we help? One of the key things, as I've already sort of alluded to here, is you probably don't need to start from scratch. I know a lot of, as they look to modernize things like the user interface or the HMI, everyone's like, oh, I got to go through and, I have to start from scratch on everything. You don't necessarily have to start from scratch on everything. For starters, your SCADA system is, ultimately the job of a SCADA system is to get that OT data and make it available in a real-time database so that you can access it. That part of your system is likely not changing as much if it's an existing system. Obviously, if you're expanding and things like that, it does bring in, additional configuration, but for the most part, you've already got the most the OT data that you likely need. You're probably already collecting. It's really about modernizing the experience for the operator to make them more effective, as an example. You know, so it's really, again, you've got the stable server. Now it's, hey, how do I start looking at how my users interact with the system, you know, based on their roles? Is it a process-based thing or a task-based display that I want to provide? You know, start looking at how do I, you know, some of those factors I mentioned. How do I develop a style guide so that, you know, colors are always consistent? You know, red is always an alarm. You know, green might be something else. Blue means something. You know, like make the color mean something and be consistent. You know, so we have seen, especially as applications have been put together piecemeal, you know, those things can start to stray. But if you've got a good style guide, you know, just doesn't have to be super elaborate, but just something that provides guidelines. So as you develop new displays, there's a level of consistency as well. Obviously, there's some tools we can provide, you know, for templating and stuff like that that help, but really there is a discipline there to make sure things are being followed as well. You know, like you can also look at starting off by, you know, the example I gave previously with a map, or that could be just a higher level menu. You know, start off with that, you know, make it easier to access even my existing screens. And then what you can do is start building complementary screens or complementary clients, and then slowly transition. You know, so, you know, again, the guide here is really what we're trying to say here is you don't have to do it as a big bang. You can do it by, you know, slowly evolving your application as well. You know, because again, you're building on a solid core of the data. You're really here just trying to make sure that you're getting the right information to the right roles. You know, so again, these are just some simple guidelines, but you know, I also want to point out a lot of our partners do have, and working with a lot of the solution providers that you may be also working with, can also provide consultation on this topic. So I know some of our partners in Europe and North America, as an example, do provide some of that service. So something to consider there. You know, if you don't know where to start, you know, there are experts in the field, including some of our partners that can do that for you. With that, you know, so again, you know, that's one aspect of it. Another is really looking at architecture. You know, so for the most part, you know, these are just some of the high-level considerations as you start looking at, you know, what am I going to do from an architectural perspective? You know, as you're looking at your next, you know, 5-year plan, for example, you know, what are my expectations? What do I need to do to modify my current architecture to really adapt to that? You know, so things like scale, you know, and really what this is, you know, and some of this probably happened without even being conscious. You know, new users suddenly are looking for information from the system that may not have been there before. Or are you expanding? Do you expect to double your capacity in the next 5 years? Those are things that really impact scale. You know, does your current architecture actually support that? Are you looking at you know, other technologies? You know, cloud is one of the things, and I'll touch a little bit about on that later as well. You know, I'm getting more demands for some of that OT data as, you know, my business is starting to want to look at IoT solutions, or maybe, you know, monitoring things from a cloud-based web application, you know, as a simple example. Those things can change, you know, some of the architectural requirements, or you may have to now do something unnatural or feels unnatural from historical purposes. You know, things like I suddenly need to get this OT data to the cloud. You know, that presents some new challenges in terms of how do I do it securely and things like that. You know, am I currently in a simplex application, and now I want to start looking at either a failover scenario where I do have, you know, uptime is, you know, more important than it's ever been. Do I want to implement redundancy if I haven't done so already? You know, some of these are architectural changes that are going to be required. It's, you know, it could, you know, where is it? Do I have it, you know, one system, my primary in one location, secondary in another? Are they together? You know, do I want a disaster recovery scheme as part of that? So these are just some of the things to look at, and really it's, what is my current architecture and how do I kind of migrate to a modernized architecture if I do need to take advantage of things like thin clients and cloud as an example. So again, these are just some of the considerations. And one of the things that we are finding very common, especially in the water industry, but even in other industries as well, and I kind of touched on a little bit even, looking at it from a security perspective, but it's really about centralization, especially if you've got larger systems with multiple SCADA systems, how are you hitting those different SCADA systems? Can I take and combine some of those SCADA systems and have them in have it as one larger server instead of several small servers? All these are all considerations from a centralization perspective. And the other thing I kind of touched on is, as we continually, technology adapts. Obviously, the last decade or more have, 10 to 15 years have brought us mobile phones, tablets, all sorts of new devices. One example on, from, I know one of our customers was looking at leveraging things like our operations hub to provide read-only views for mobile operators. So they're not doing control from, when they're out actually in the field, but they might need some of that information. So how do I make that available, and how do I architect and make sure it's secure? It's all part of some of the previous topics, but really these all come together. So if you are looking at centralizing, what does that mean? Am I putting it in a cloud? Do I have a central location that is my network secure? All these things really do come into play. But, by centralizing, there are some benefits. It's not for everyone, but, centralizing does help in terms of reducing the number of systems that you're managing, making sure the broader set of data is available to, if you are centralizing some of your engineering, as an example, do I have that information relatively available? Do I have to, go to 5 different clients or connect to 5 different servers to get it? Could I centralize it and get it all at once? And the other piece around centralizing really comes down to even things like historical data and stuff like that. Is that being stored locally and then I need to pull it, or should I just go straight to a central historical database, as an example? So again, these are all factors that can have an impact. And some examples on the side there, including things like reducing troubleshooting time and getting that investment quickly just by from the reduced maintenance, as an example. So again, not everybody's the same. Just some considerations that you may want to look at is, should I be centralizing? And as I've already referenced some of the architectures, this is a more simplex traditional architecture. And then bringing in kind of a more complex architecture with failover, as an example, where I want redundancy at the controls, I want redundancy at the server level, and even redundant client architecture. These are all things that you may want to consider, again, depending on the criticality. I guess I consider, especially my water supply, I consider it critical that I can get a glass of water and take a shower every day. So, mileage may vary, but, again, if you've got some of these initiatives, these are some areas that you can definitely provide some guidance as well. And actually, even as, I've talked about centralizing or making systems available in that architecture, some of that architecture could, we do have customers that have cloud initiatives where they're looking at, hey, I don't even want to manage the hardware anymore. Wherever I can get away with it. And one of the things we can offer as well is, especially for your existing SCADA, you may have Historian, you may be using our web technology like Operations Hub or WebSpace. And I'll talk a little bit about analytics as well. Some of those parts and pieces could be in the cloud. So really the way we look at it is we've got some flexibility in terms of architecture and really helping provide a more flexible architecture options in your architecture. So these are just some simple examples. It might be a little bit difficult to read. But it's like I could go from everywhere, from everything in the cloud to, hey, I'm going to leave my SCADA on site, but I'm going to put my historical data in the cloud and do my analytics in the cloud, as an example, or anywhere in between ultimately. I could have my web services hosted in the cloud with the SCADA on site, or the web services could be local. So really, this is just sort of shows a few examples. We've definitely got more available on our documentation site as well. But again, these are just some things to consider if you do have, or you do have any cloud initiatives that you're looking at. It's really kind of looking at it from the perspective of, what may make sense for you to put in a cloud architecture. And again, a lot of people do this basically to not have to deal with hardware anymore from an IT perspective. Others do it for just ease of access globally. If you are someone more global, so if you're someone who's managing systems not just in your region but across the country or the globe, you may, things like cloud architecture can be helpful there as well. So again, we can definitely help provide some guidance there. We've got some architectures documented on our website. And again, as always, we've got partners globally that can really help with that effort as well. Kind of moving to, the next topic here, as we start looking at, into the future and, how do we make our systems a bit smarter? One of the big things in the industry, not just in this industry, but pretty much in any industry globally, and it's always a hot topic in the news, is really starting to look at analytics and artificial intelligence and kind of these newer technologies in terms of how could it apply and help me within what I'm trying to do. So one of the things that we look at is and you'll kind of see the phrase at the top there. It's like SCADA systems have traditionally been supervisory systems. How can we start not just have supervisory control, but actually start doing advisory as well? And really, when I look at analytics, at least today, it's a way of helping augment the decision process, right? Being able to say, hey, last time this happened, this occurred, that type of information can really help you, really make a transition to more of a smarter water network, as the term says. So today, obviously, you're collecting data, you're storing the data in a historian. So the SCADA is collecting data real-time basis. You're storing historical data in many cases, so you can go back and look at the last month of information. You're storing it for different reasons probably today. Might be regulatory reports you need to provide, historical pH levels, whatever it happens to be. That's typically why we're doing it today. But that information, and you're probably starting to see increases in demand for more and more of that OT data based on that. Meaning, I might be grabbing some of that data and storing it for regulatory means, but there's actually other treasure in that information that really, if we start to doing more analysis on it, could actually help us predict and optimize. So really the concept here is, today you're probably living in the collect, store the data, let me do my HMI so I can interact with the data. Kind of that next level is to start analyzing the data. So some of that is leveraging things like historian analysis tools manually, but really where the industry is going is, how can I actually automate some of that analysis that is ultimately going to help me lead to doing things like predicting issues before they occur and ultimately optimizing. And, really where we're closing the loop is, and I'll use one example that I'm going to go through in a while. If I've got a PID loop optimizing analytic, how do I want to actually go through and figure that out. And at the next level, it's going to be, hey, I'm going to make a process change, and then the cycle continues, right? I might continually optimize that loop, for example, or go on to the next optimization task. But really, that's really what we're trying to do here is, we see everything shifting, to more of a leveraging analytics for advisory, and then ultimately we want to be able to close the loop within our software solutions as well. So one of the big things is and I'm not going to go through this eye chart. I kind of touched on this already, but really it all starts with data. If you don't have the data, it's hard to analyze. So you may be collecting and storing some of that relevant data today. You may be missing some of that data. And then often what that really means is you need to log more data. and there's two ways of looking at logging that data. One is, as you get demands or asks for providing some sort of optimization, you may need to start collecting that data. The other approach a lot have taken is, hey, I know I may not be implementing analytics now, but I know I will be in the future, and I know more information is going to be needed, so I'm going to start collecting more data now. So that's really where, again, things like a historian become super important. That's really the repository for all that data that we're going to do the analytics leverage for the analytics. That's going to be a really key component. So I know one presentation I attended from on a customer event, one of the customers actually said, hey, you know what? Start collecting the data now because you're going to need it. And that's really just something to think about. In other words, if you're planning on doing analytics in a year, start collecting now so then you have a year of data that you can use for that optimization. So if you decide to do it next year and then start collecting the data, when you start doing the analytics, you're not going to get meaningful analytics for a period of time until you really start building up that history. So again, it really does require data if you are going down this path. So, obviously we do have our prophecy historian, or you may be using other systems, but, it's really important to start leveraging that data. And then we also do have tools that can help with this. We do have our CSense product, which is really one of our AI tools that can really help you out. And the idea here is with CSense, it's really about doing things like data analysis and looking at root cause. So often what ends up happening is, an event may occur, and without some of that other additional information or something, you analyzing it manually or having a tool in place, identifying the root cause may take a lot longer. So, but really ultimately when you have an issue, you want to identify that root cause so you can address the issue up front so it doesn't happen again, as an example. Obviously monitoring, looking at early warnings, so things like sensors and control loops, sensors can fail, sensors can go bad over time. How do you find out when it's drifting away from proper values and stuff like that? You can obviously monitor it manually, or could we automate that for you? Prediction and forecasting, starting to look at history, hey, these events always occur to this, and simulation, and then obviously optimization. In the end, really what we're talking about here is, the CSense product itself can help you with really taking a look at that, looking for relationship between values so you can start identifying, what is impacting what essentially within your data set, and hopefully leading to optimizations is really the goal in this. And as one person put it, if you've got, I know this is a kind of, not everyone here is looking after 10 plants, but sometimes even a small percentage improvement can lead to significant savings in time, money, and more as well. So again, just something to consider there. And then, one of the other things, we talk about with CSense is obviously, it is a tool set that requires you to kind of connect to data, look at data, provide, so there is some effort involved in that. And what we've done is actually started to put together some common templates for common analytics, really to help things get going faster and really help you get value out of analytics faster. So one of the things we've done with our 2024 version, so this should say 2024 license, but with version 2024 of our software, whether it's iFIX, Simplicity, or Historian, you do get some analytics that come out of the box with that. So we do provide a starter version of our CSense, which lets you, I don't have all the limitations on it off the top of my head, but for the most part, it's limited by just how many of things you can analyze. But the starter version does give you the ability to take that CSense product with some of these templates and connect it to your existing data and start getting some value out of it. So some of the things that we are providing as out-of-the-box templates, one of them is alarm pattern monitoring. So the concept here is alarms typically occur in multiples, meaning if something goes wrong upstream, typically you're going to get a bunch of alarms downstream unless you've configured conditional alarms as an example. So what this alarm pattern monitoring lets you do, what it does provide information on is how often, what alarms occur together and how often do they occur together. So really what this lets you do is say, hey, this pump failed, which led to, flow, the decrease in flow, the tanks levels dropping, et cetera. If you just look at the tank level, then I know this is a really simple example, but if you look at the tank level, it's like, why is the tank level dropping? You have to kind of go upstream to figure out, why that's happening. This is the concept of this is if you don't necessarily have that relationship in your head already, it'll identify that relationship for you and really help you improve. Ultimately it's about then you can address it through alarm configuration and things like that. So to provide better guidance to the operator so he knows, what to go address if it's not immediately obvious. There's another template there for sensor health monitoring. And what this does is allow us to monitor a sensor to look for, is it drifting? Is it going out of range often? All those type of things. It'll give you an alert basically saying, hey, the sensor needs attention, it might need cleaning, replacing, whatever it happens to be. We've got some general learning templates as well as I mentioned the PID control loop health as well. So these are just some of the key things that we do provide with these templates. And again, if you have interest and you're leveraging our 2024 solution, contact our channel partners or ourselves and we can help you get that starter version so you can start to look at how you might want to leverage analytics now and in the future as well. And this is just a quick example of that template. And I just realized I am getting low on time, so just going through the last couple here. This is just an example of a little bit hard to read, but just which patterns occur most often is really, I just wanted to give one example of what you're going to get out of the box with some of those templates. Sustainability, this is, something that there are initiatives, different, companies, different water utilities, depending on where you're located, may or may not have some initiatives there. These are just a couple simple metrics to just sort of, really look at, why it matters, probably more than just, hey, I've got sustainability goals, but, as an example, for most utilities, energy usage is actually one of the biggest costs. So, if you're not doing it for sustainability reasons, sometimes it's just as simple as, hey, if I can reduce my energy usage through optimization, I can reduce not just my carbon footprint, but just costs in general. So there's a lot of good reasons to look at sustainability. And a lot of it really comes down to just leveraging some of the things that you've already got in place again, right? So you're already collecting and analyzing information. You've got your historical data. This is really just another analytic, potentially, and monitoring. It's both, I guess, monitoring and, if you're not measuring energy usage, you can't improve it and figure out where energy is being wasted and things like that. So a lot of that comes down to having the necessary data, again, that comes back to Historian and then leveraging tools like our CSense One of the things that we have put together is we do have a sustainability insights now as an offering that, again, you can talk to our partners about or contact us about. But really what it does is it provides some out-of-the-box templates for monitoring things like energy usage, water. You know, in some industries, water usage is important. You know, the water you're providing, they're trying to reduce, and the amount of usage of that type of thing. But again, I know I'm kind of, I'm just noticing the time is up, so I wanted to kind of just at least get at a high level some of that in. And, you know, quick summary, you know I went through a lot of topics today. It's really about getting current with our software. You know, we've got a lot of, if you implemented your application 20 years ago, you're probably not using all of our HMI technology that we've got available. You probably may want to relook at your screen designs and things like that. You know, cybersecurity is always an issue, you know, so you might want to look at, relook at your configuration. Again, we've got guides that go through recommended settings and things like that that can help you reduce your security profile or risk profile. Look at that user experience and see if you can really help reduce response times and things like that. Analytics really are something that can help, at least from an optimization perspective. And one of the other key things, as mentioned previously, you know, historical data really is a key enabler for a lot of this. So if you're not logging data, you might want to start considering it. If you're going to need more data, you know, talk to us. We can help you out there as well if you do need to do that. So sorry for rushing a bit at the end, but one of the things I also, and I think Phaedra may come in and mention as well, we do have our survey. One of the things that we want to do, because I know I just touched on 5 really key topics. We do want to do a deeper dive some deeper dive sessions into these, and really with, you know, more detailed examples and things like that. So one of the things in the survey is asking, you know, of these topics, or if you have other things in mind, you know, what would you like to see a deeper dive on? And with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining. And I know we have limited time for questions, but we'll see what we can get done here.
Yeah, we technically are over time, but if those of you are able to stay, we are able to stay and answer your questions. We can also provide responses to these questions via email to you directly. We do see a couple questions that I think we can go through hopefully fast. How do you connect Operations Hub to iFIX, and how do you license Operations Hub for such applications? I don't know if that's a quick answer or not, but.
Yeah, it's fairly quick. Yeah. So basically, we're leveraging standard technology. So Operations Hub gets its data from iFIX through iFIX's OPC UA interface. So OPC UA is an industry standard. It's a secure certificate-based communications method. So really, it's just connecting to iFIX through that OPC UA interface for data and alarm. So it gets its alarm information to put in the alarm viewer, and if you just need any real-time data, you can just set that up through the OPC UA connection.
Great.
And in terms of
part
2, yeah, I just noticed part 2 there as well. In terms of licensing, we are actually providing one client with the 2024 version that you can start to try out, but it is sold by client, and the pricing is kind of scaling based on the quantity of clients as well. So again, contact your channel partner, or if you don't have a partner you're working with, just reach out to us and we'll help direct that as well.
Great. We will be providing the presentation to everyone via email, post. So we'll save the recording and make sure that that's sent out to everyone. So you will be getting a recording of this. So thank you for joining. And then finally, if we have time, what specific use case do we have in water for CSense? And you could probably do a whole presentation on that. But...
Yeah, I was just going to say that might be one for the deeper dive on analytics for the water industry. But what we've done with some customers, you know, we've done things like pump analytics to look for early failure in pumps, you know, so we've got customers that have done that. Some of the ones I mentioned around things like alarming, for example, you know, just helping get to root cause alarms. You know, sensors, another one that, I talked about, just monitoring sensors to see when they need to be addressed, before they become an issue or they've drifted or if they're failing, getting those early detections. So those are just a few key, like pump analytics is probably a bigger one that we can dig in deeper, but, it's really around looking at variables that can help you predict, give you early detection of when a pump may fail before it actually fails. So again, those are just a few small examples, but definitely reach out if you want to do a deeper dive into that.
Fantastic. Well, that is all we have for today, folks. I know we are a couple minutes over time, but thank you for joining us. Thank you for staying in the overtime. As I mentioned already, we will definitely be providing the presentation to those who are interested in reliving any of this. And please, as Gimmi already mentioned, I'm just going to reiterate, please take the survey because we want to make sure that we continue to bring you relevant content in the future. And with that, I think we will close this out. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day,
Thanks,
evening, all of that.